The Dominion War Council meeting disbanded with an unusual atmosphere of unease. Commander Vexar remained in the briefing chamber, reviewing additional footage that hadn't been suitable for the General Assembly. These clips, intercepted from something humans called social media, showed failed candidates, those who rang the bell and quit during their training. What disturbed Vexar wasn't their failure, but the societal aftermath. While the Krathar exiled or executed warriors who demonstrated weakness, humans treated their washouts with a perplexing mixture of respect and disappointment. Commander, a moment. Vexar turned to find Science Director Nixera entering the chamber, her slender form silhouetted against the harsh corridor lighting. Unlike most Krathar, she had refused extensive cybernetic enhancements, claiming they interfered with scientific objectivity. "The human physiological data you requested," she said, transferring a data crystal. "Though I'm uncertain why you're fixated on their biological limitations when their technology poses no immediate threat." Vexar activated the crystal, displaying human medical statistics. "Because something doesn't align, Director. These creatures evolved on a high-gravity death world, yet their baseline capabilities are unimpressive." The hologram displayed average human strength metrics, endurance limits, and sensory capabilities, all markedly inferior to Krathar standards. "Precisely," Nixera agreed. "Their physical parameters suggest they should have been prey species, not apex predators. Even accounting for their abnormally developed cerebral cortex, they shouldn't have survived their evolutionary history." Vexar manipulated the display, shifting to footage of human warfare throughout their history. Now observe their performance in actual combat situations. The images showed humans functioning despite injuries that should have been incapacitating, continuing to fight with broken limbs, massive blood loss, and under conditions of extreme environmental stress. This discrepancy, Vexar continued, suggests their baseline physical parameters are irrelevant. Something about their psychology allows them to routinely exceed theoretical limitations. Nixera's normally impassive features betrayed concern. "You believe their training methods are responsible. I've compiled data from 17 species the Dominion has conquered. All had superior natural abilities to humans. None intentionally subjected themselves to unnecessary suffering as preparation for combat." The science director studied the montage of human training methods with growing discomfort. They appear to be deliberately programming themselves to ignore survival instincts. "Precisely. While we select warriors with suppressed pain responses, humans manufacture them." Vexar closed the display. "I'm volunteering for the observation mission to Earth." Nixera's head tilted in surprise. "A commander of your rank. The Supreme Admiral will never approve." "He already has. The initial scans detected minimal weaponry capable of threatening our fleet. But these training methodologies, the psychological implications concern him." As Vexar gathered his data crystals, Nixera moved closer, lowering her voice. "There's something else in the deep scans you should know. Their planet shows evidence of multiple extinction-level events during their evolution. Not natural disasters. They nearly destroyed themselves repeatedly through warfare. And yet they survived. More than survived. Each time, they emerged with more advanced technology and more effective military doctrine." Nixera's voice dropped further. "Commander, in the history of the Dominion, we've conquered species that fight for resources, territory, or dominance. We've never encountered a species that developed the capacity to nearly annihilate itself, then built training systems specifically designed to harness that capacity." Vexar's inner eyelids closed momentarily, the Krathar equivalent of a contemplative blink. "Perhaps that's the true purpose of my mission, Director. Not to assess their technology or tactics, but to determine if humans are more dangerous to themselves or to us." The transport helicopter thundered over Georgia's pine forests, its vibrations rattling Vexar's exoskeletal plates. Tilara clutched her restraints, her translucent skin cycling through stress-indicative color patterns. 4 other alien representatives, the remnants of what had begun as a 12-species delegation, sat in uncomfortable silence. Captain Mitchell, seemingly immune to the aircraft's violent motions, studied a datapad. "We've modified the training program to accommodate your physiological differences," she shouted over the rotor noise. "The goal isn't to break you, but to provide authentic experience." "Define break," Tilara called back nervously. Mitchell's eyes remained on her datapad. "Training serves two purposes: skill acquisition and stress inoculation. The second part requires creating controlled adversity." Vexar's translator struggled with inoculation, eventually rendering it as deliberate infection with weakened pathogen to trigger immunity response. The parallel was disturbingly apt. The helicopter banked sharply, revealing Fort Benning sprawled below. A vast complex of rectangular buildings, obstacle courses, and firing ranges. Humans scurried about like insects, many carrying heavy equipment despite the sweltering heat visible in rising air distortions. "The Joint Chiefs are particularly interested in your assessment of our methods," Mitchell continued, finally making eye contact with Vexar. "We've studied your Dominion's warrior selection protocols. Very efficient." The implied critique wasn't lost on Vexar. "You disagree with our approach." "Different evolutionary paths, different solutions," she replied diplomatically. "You identify genetic predisposition for warrior attributes and enhance them. We assume anyone can become a warrior with proper conditioning." A helicopter descended toward a landing zone, where 4 humans in uniform waited at rigid attention despite the rotor wash battering them. The temperature indicator on Vexar's environmental suit registered 38 degrees Celsius, uncomfortably hot for his species, yet the human showed no signs of discomfort. After landing, Mitchell introduced drill sergeants Ramirez, Jackson, Chen, and Okonkwo. Each maintained the same unnervingly rigid posture, eyes fixed forward, expressions neutral to the point of appearing artificial. "These instructors represent our finest training cadre," Mitchell explained. "Each has combat experience and specialized teaching methodology." To Lyra, ever the diplomat, attempted friendly engagement. "We're eager to learn about your cultural approaches, To." "You will speak only when addressed directly," Sergeant Ramirez interrupted, his voice precisely calibrated to project authority without shouting. "You are not visitors. You are not observers. You are trainees. You have no rank, no status, and no privileges." The abrupt shift was jarring. Moments ago, they were diplomatic guests. Now they were being addressed like subordinates. Vexar noticed Tilara's skin flashing indignant patterns, but before she could protest, Mitchell stepped forward. "This is the first lesson," she explained calmly. "In basic training, we strip away previous identity to build something new. For the next 8 weeks, forget your diplomats and warriors. Consider yourselves raw material." Sergeant Jackson approached, carrying standard-issue duffel bags scaled to each alien's physiology. "You have 8 minutes to change into these uniforms, store your personal items in footlockers, and report to the parade ground. Beginning now." As the sergeants marched away, Tila returned to Vexar in disbelief. "They can't seriously expect us to." 7 minutes, 40 seconds, called Sergeant Chen without turning. Vexar hefted his duffel bag, noting it had been precisely weighted to challenge his strength, just as the human bags challenged theirs. Someone had calculated the exact proportional burden. "I believe, Ambassador," he said quietly, "we're about to learn why the Supreme Admiral found these humans so concerning." In the dim barracks at 200 hours, Vexar silently observed Jenkins performing an unusual ritual. The human, having been awakened for fire watch duty, was meticulously repolishing boots that already gleamed. More curiously, he was doing so without complaint, despite having had only 2 hours of sleep. "Your footwear already exceeds requirements," Vexar whispered, mindful of the other exhausted recruits. Jenkins glanced up, dark circles prominent beneath his eyes. "Not about the boots, sir. It's about—" "Don't call me sir," Vexar interrupted, recalling Sergeant Ramirez's blistering tirade when Tilara had addressed him by her diplomatic title. "We're both equal in our worthlessness, remember." A faint smile crossed Jenkins' face. Force of habit. Back home, Anyone 9 feet tall with combat medals gets a sir. What did you mean? Not about the boots. Jenkins applied another layer of polish with mechanical precision. Control. See, they take away everything you can control. When you eat, sleep, speak. So you cling to the small things you can perfect. My boots, my bed corners, makes the rest bearable. Vexar processed this unexpected insight. The Krathar psychological profile had classified humans as stubbornly individualistic, yet here they were, systematically surrendering individuality. Yesterday, Vexar said, during the obstacle course, you assisted Rodriguez when he struggled with the wall climb. Yeah. You reduced your individual performance metrics to improve his. Jenkins shrugged. Wouldn't make it out there alone anyway. 2 nights ago, didn't you share your ration supplement with T. Lara when her environmental suit malfunctioned? Vexar's mandibles clicked in surprise. How did you? Night vision's excellent in these. Jenkins tapped his eye. Staff Sergeant didn't miss it either. The revelation that the instructors had observed his minor act of assistance was unsettling. Will there be disciplinary consequence? Doubt it. They're watching how we form as a unit. Solo performance matters less than cohesion. A sudden commotion outside drew their attention. Flashlight beams swept through the windows as instructors shouted in the courtyard. Moments later, Sergeant Jackson burst through the door. Gas attack drill. Masks on, 90 seconds to evacuation formation. Chaos erupted as recruits scrambled for their protective equipment. Vexar fumbled with his specialized alien breathing apparatus, fingers clumsy with fatigue. To his shock, Jenkins paused in his own preparations to help adjust the unwieldy mask over Vexar's cranial ridges. 30 seconds wasted, Jenkins, bellowed Jackson. You'd be dead in combat. Better 1 casualty than 2, Sergeant. Jenkins responded without hesitation. Outside in the formation, as chemical simulation smoke billowed around them, Vexar noted something remarkable. Despite the pandemonium, the humans had emerged in squad formation, automatically positioning themselves to account for visibility limitations in the smoke. No orders had been given for this specific arrangement. They had adapted instinctively. Later, as dawn broke and they began another grueling physical training session, Vexar activated his subdermal recorder, dictating observations between labored breaths. Day 8 assessment. Previous analysis fundamentally flawed. We categorized human training as punishment endurance test. Incorrect. It's calibrated system shock. Deliberate disruption of individual coping mechanisms to force interdependence. Subjects don't survive by becoming hardened individuals. They survive by becoming something new, functional parts of collective organism. Most concerning, process appears to be working on non-human subjects. Hilara's diplomatic protocol programming showing signs of degradation. She instinctively passed water to Mervani, recruit during last March without formal request. As if summoned by his thoughts, Hilara jogged alongside him, her normally immaculate appearance now mud-spattered and disheveled. Commander, she whispered, using his military title rather than his name, a subtle but significant change. I need to send an emergency update to the Council. Regarding. Her eyes darted to the human recruits running ahead of them. I've identified what makes them dangerous. It's not their training methods. Then what? They're contagious. The medical tent smelled of antiseptic and sweat. Vexar sat on a reinforced cot as the human physician, Dr. Katri, examined the puncture wounds on his leg where the snake had struck. Her gloved hands moved with practiced efficiency across scales that most of her species would find repulsive. Fascinating immune response, she murmured, taking samples. Your cellular regeneration rate accelerated after the venom introduction. Almost like your body. Learned from it. Krathar physiology adapts to toxins, Vexar explained. Evolutionary necessity on our homeworld. The predator's there. Save the xenobiology lesson, trainee. Sergeant Ramirez interrupted, entering the tent. Doctor, is he combat effective? Dr. Caftry straightened. The venom's neutralized. Cellular inflammation will persist for approximately 48 hours, causing moderate pain during exertion. Understood. He rejoined his unit in 10 minutes. After the doctor stepped away, Ramirez lowered his voice. Your squad carried you 8 miles through swampland. That builds something no training manual can teach. Vexar observed the human carefully. You orchestrated this. The route adjustment through snake-inhabited territory. A flicker of something, respect, perhaps, crossed Ramirez's face. Training presents controlled adversity. Sometimes we control it more than trainees realize. You risked my life to forge unit cohesion. Low risk, high reward. Our xenobiology team calculated the snake venom would be irritating but not lethal to your species. Ramirez checked his watch. The real test wasn't physical anyway. Outside, Vexar found Jenkins and Rodriguez waiting. Neither mentioned the 8-mile carry, but Jenkins handed him a ration supplement formulated for his species' higher protein requirements. Managed to trade with the quartermaster, Jenkins explained with a shrug. Figured you'd need the extra calories after the venom. The simple act of consideration felt strangely significant. Among the Krathar, warriors competed for resources. Sharing was viewed as weakness. Yet these humans consistently sacrificed individual advantage for collective benefit. That evening, Captain Mitchell summoned Vexar to the command post. A secure communication from the Dominion awaited him. Supreme Admiral Cathax's scaled visage filled the screen, mandibles twitching with impatience. Your transmissions have become irregular. Commander, Cathax began without preamble. The Galactic Council grows concerned about your extended immersion. Ambassador Tilura's last report contained disturbing psychological assessments. Vexar composed his thoughts carefully. The training methodologies are more sophisticated than initially apparent. Supreme Admiral. They're designed to. We're aware of their primitive endurance drills. Cathax dismissed. The diplomatic corps has proposed terminating the exchange. Your extraction is scheduled for the next lunar cycle. A strange resistance formed in Vexar's mind. The thought of leaving before completing the program felt like failure. The realization startled him. With respect, Supreme Admiral, premature extraction would forfeit valuable intelligence. The transformation process remains incomplete. Transformation. Explain. The humans aren't merely conditioning their warriors physically. They're rewiring neural pathways, replacing instinctive self-preservation with unit preservation reflexes. Vexar hesitated. I've begun documenting measurable changes in my own cognitive patterns. Cathax's inner eyelids flickered rapidly, a sign of alarm. You believe you're being reprogrammed. I believe I'm understanding what makes humans effective despite their physical limitations. Their training creates a specialized form of collective intelligence. Individual weakness becomes irrelevant within the unit structure. After disconnecting, Vexar limped back toward the barracks. He found Tilara waiting near the perimeter, her diplomatic composure significantly eroded after weeks of training. The council wants me to withdraw, she said without greeting. They're concerned about psychological contamination. Are they justified? Vexar asked. Hilara's gaze drifted to where Rodriguez was helping a Mravani trainee adjust equipment. Yesterday, I shared my water ration without calculating political advantage. Last week, I would have considered such behavior irrational. And now? Now I'm not certain which perspective is correct. She looked directly at Vexar. The council fears we're becoming too human. What they don't understand is that humans became what they are by facing environments even more hostile than their training. We're experiencing a compressed version of their entire evolutionary history. Meaning perhaps becoming more human isn't contamination. Perhaps it's adaptation. Dawn broke over the rescue staging area, revealing the hurricane's devastation. Fallen trees created natural barriers across access roads, and rising floodwaters had transformed the training grounds into a treacherous maze. Captain Mitchell surveyed the tactical map, marking the last known positions of missing squads. 3 hours until the next weather front hits, the meteorologist warned. Wind speeds expected to increase by 40%. Mitchell nodded grimly. We've recovered 2 squads, still missing Jenkins' unit with our alien observers. At the edge of the operations tent, a junior officer approached hesitantly. Captain, Command is ordering us to prioritize extraction of the diplomatic personnel. The Galactic Council has filed an official inquiry. Not happening, Mitchell replied without looking up. We extract everyone or no one. Ma'am, with respect, there are interstellar political considerations. There's only one consideration in my training command, Lieutenant. Every trainee returns, regardless of species. She traced a route through the digital terrain. We'll approach from the North Ridge. The fire tower is here, but the access road is underwater. Meanwhile, in the abandoned fire tower, T. Lara slipped in and out of consciousness as infection set in around her leg wound. The makeshift tourniquet, created from Jenkins' uniform shirt, had stopped the initial bleeding but couldn't prevent bacterial infiltration. Her biological system is too different, Rodriguez whispered, checking her temperature. Our antiseptics might be making it worse. Vexar studied the alien diplomat's fluctuating vital signs. Her species has redundant circulatory systems. If we can isolate the infected pathway, like compartmentalizing a sinking ship, Jenkins suggested. Precisely. Vexar's combat medical training had never been applied to non-Krathar physiology, but the principles might transfer. I need something to create pressure points here and here. As they worked, the Mravani trainee who had been silently observing suddenly spoke, its crystalline voice translation module crackling with static. Incoming aircraft. Low altitude. 2 kilometers southwest. Jenkins moved to the observation deck, using damaged binoculars to scan the horizon. Rescue chopper, but they can't land in this wind. His expression darkened, and the clearings flooded anyway. Rodriguez joined him, surveying the swaying treetops and roiling water below. We need to create a landing zone. What followed was a display of improvisation that Vexar would later struggle to explain in his official report. The human trainees, using only basic survival tools, systematically converted the tower's upper platform into a makeshift helicopter landing pad. They dismantled interior structures for materials, calculated weight distributions without instruments, and repurposed emergency flares into landing markers. Most remarkably, they performed these complex tasks with minimal verbal communication, as if each instinctively understood their role in the collective effort. When Captain Mitchell's voice crackled through a partially functioning radio, Jenkins responded with precise coordinates and structural specifications for the landing zone. There was no celebration, only continued preparation. Humans train for equipment failure. Vexar observed quietly to the semi-conscious T. Lara. The Dominion trains with the assumption of technological superiority, which approach survives first contact with crisis. The diplomat's eyes flickered open. The Council believes technology defines advancement. These humans, she struggled to focus, they've developed something more fundamental. Adaptability as a cultural cornerstone. The helicopter approached through violent wind shears, its frame shuddering against forces that should have grounded it. Vexar recognized Mitchell in the co-pilot's seat, her face set with the same determination he'd observed throughout training, the expression of someone who had already rejected the possibility of failure. As the aircraft touched down on their improvised landing zone, a structure that shouldn't have supported its weight, Jenkins turned to Vexar with an expression the alien was still learning to interpret. Pride, perhaps, but not individual satisfaction. Something deeper. This, Jenkins shouted over the rotor wash, gesturing to their improbable survival scenario, is what the training builds toward, not the obstacle courses or the marches. Vexar understood finally. The endless drills weren't about the specific skills being taught. They were about creating warriors who, when faced with impossible scenarios, would instinctively believe in possible solutions. The simulation ended with an unexpected outcome: total defeat of the Krathar combat protocols. Admiral Kithax's personal guard stood in stunned silence as Mitchell's human squad gathered near the holographic interface, casually discussing their approach as if their victory had been inevitable. "Impossible," muttered Sub-Commander Drex, K-Fax's chief strategist. "The simulation was calibrated for 20 elite warriors. 5 humans couldn't possibly. They exploited a system vulnerability we never considered," Vexar interjected, reviewing the mission logs. "They treated terrain as an active resource rather than passive background." Thax gestured for elaboration. "Krathar training emphasizes direct confrontation," Vexar explained. "Humans approach conflict asymmetrically. Observe how they redirected the simulated river to disable our southern sensor grid." The Admiral's inner eyelids flicked rapidly, a sign of intense calculation. Environmental manipulation requires additional resources. The time investment alone should have exposed them to counterattack. That's where their formation becomes relevant. Vexar highlighted the tactical display. They maintained minimal effective force at contact points while committing their main effort to environmental alteration. Our warriors pursued maximum engagement, exactly as our doctrine dictates. K-Fax absorbed this with unsettling quietude before addressing Mitchell. "You deliberately revealed your tactical philosophy. Why?" The captain's expression remained neutral. "The exchange program's purpose is mutual understanding. We showed you how we think." "Not entirely," Rodriguez muttered, earning a sharp glance from Mitchell. K-Fax caught the exchange. "Clarify, human." Rodriguez hesitated until Mitchell nodded permission. "Sir, we deliberately used a recognizable historical strategy, specifically elements from Earth's Battle of Cannae. We figured your military historians would have studied our classical warfare." This revelation sent ripples of discomfort through the Krathar staff. Vexar understood immediately. The humans had intentionally selected a transparent approach rather than revealing their actual tactical innovations. A teaching demonstration rather than a combat trial. K-Fax concluded, mandibles clicking in what might have been amusement. Clever. Later, in the battlecruiser's strategic observation chamber, K-Fax studied Earth's rotation on the main view screen. Vexar stood at attention, awaiting the Admiral's assessment. "The Council remains divided," K-Fax began. "Some advocate immediate quarantine protocols for Earth. Others propose technological sharing to cement alliance. Both approaches misunderstand them," Vexar responded. "Explain." "Humans don't seek technology as primary advancement. They value methodological innovation, process over product. Giving them technology would only accelerate their adaptation of it beyond our recognition." K-Fax's scales shifted in the Krathar equivalent of a contemplative sigh. "And quarantine. Equally misguided. Their history shows isolation forces creative problem-solving. Earth's regional conflicts produced their most significant military innovations." The Admiral turned from the view screen. "The diplomatic corps believes we should fear them. The Science Directorate believes we should study them. What do you believe, Commander?" Vexar considered the question carefully. 2 months ago, his answer would have been unequivocal. Assess threat level and respond accordingly. Now, after experiencing human training methodologies firsthand, his perspective had fundamentally shifted. "I believe we should become more like them," he said finally. "Explain this heresy." "Their strength isn't physical or technological. It's philosophical. They've developed systems to transform ordinary beings into extraordinary collectives. The Dominion selects for inherent superiority. Humans create it through process." K-Fax studied Vexar with new intensity. "You've changed, Commander." "Yes, Admiral. That's precisely my point." The Admiral activated a secure channel to the Dominion High Command. "Prepare for strategic reassessment. Classification level. Existential paradigm shift." He turned back to Vexar. The humans' demonstration revealed something far more valuable than tactical doctrine. It revealed how much we've limited ourselves through our own training philosophy. "Your orders, Admiral." "Observe their final training exercise tomorrow. Then help me understand how we might implement their methodologies without losing our Krathar identity." And if those objectives prove mutually exclusive, Keithax's expression hardened. Then we must determine which holds greater survival value for our species. The Arcturian chairperson's facial appendages vibrated with increasing agitation as Vexar's testimony continued. Behind him, representatives from 200 species engaged in hushed conversations, their universal translators creating a background hum of concerned murmuring. "Commander," the chairperson interrupted, "your assessment contradicts our xenopsychological models. Humans don't possess the neurological architecture for the level of cooperative behavior you're describing." Vexar activated a new holographic display. "With respect, Chairperson, your models examined human individuals in isolation. Their remarkable trait is emergent behavior under stress, qualities that only manifest in group dynamics." The display showed brain scans taken during the hurricane rescue operation. Multicolored neural pathways illuminated as the human trainees coordinated their efforts without verbal communication. Observe the synchronization patterns in their limbic and prefrontal regions during crisis response. Vexar continued. Their brains aren't just cooperating. They're partially merging function. The cephaloid representative floated forward, its tentacles undulating with skepticism. Impossible. No species demonstrates neural entrainment at this scale without hive mind evolution. That's precisely what makes humans unique, Ambassador Tilera interjected, her previously severe diplomatic demeanor now tempered by weeks of shared hardship. They've culturally evolved what other species required biological evolution to achieve. The council chamber erupted into debates until the chairperson restored order. These assertions are extraordinary. What evidence beyond neural scans supports your conclusion that humans represent a unique threat paradigm? Vexar hesitated, then removed his ceremonial armor plate, revealing a series of scars across his torso, some from combat, but the newest from training exercises with humans. "I submit myself as evidence," he said quietly. "I began this mission as a standard Krothar commander, individually focused, competition-oriented, and hierarchically minded. After 8 weeks in their training program, I find myself instinctively calculating group success parameters before personal advancement." A wave of discomfort passed through the chamber. The idea that mere exposure to human methodology could rewire even Krothar psychology was disturbing on multiple levels. "Are you claiming some form of indoctrination?" the chairperson asked carefully. "No, Chairperson. I'm describing adaptive evolution. Humans don't conquer through force. They transform environments until their approach becomes the most viable survival strategy." Vexar gestured to Tilera. The ambassador experienced the same shift. Tilera nodded. "My diplomatic training emphasized leverage and advantage. After experiencing human collective problem-solving, those approaches now seem primitive." The Drillock's war minister, a being composed primarily of crystalline structures, activated his speaking crystal. "If what you describe is accurate, humans represent something beyond conventional threat assessment. Not an enemy to be defeated, but an evolutionary pressure that forces adaptation." "Precisely," Vexar agreed. "The traditional question of whether we could defeat humans in conflict is irrelevant. The real question is whether we wish to remain unchanged after encountering them." A prolonged silence fell over the council as the implication sank in. Finally, the Arcturian chairperson spoke. "You've both undergone this transformation. Do you consider it beneficial?" Tilera and Vexar exchanged glances, a human gesture they'd unconsciously adopted. "I find I can conceptualize solutions that would have been inaccessible to my previous thought patterns," Tilera said carefully. "Whether that's beneficial depends on how we define advancement." "And you, Commander?" Vexar considered the question. "When I departed for Earth, I was an exemplary Krothar warrior by all traditional metrics. I return with diminished interest in personal glory, but enhanced ability to ensure collective success." He straightened to full height. "I believe I am more effective, though perhaps less traditionally Krothar." The chairperson's appendages stilled in the gesture of profound decision-making. "Then we face a profound choice as a galactic community. isolation from humanity to preserve our current identities, or engagement that guarantees transformation. The integrated training field buzzed with activity as the first cohort of the Interspecies Combat Training Initiative prepared for their final exercise. 6 months of curriculum development had produced something neither entirely human nor alien, but a synthesis that emphasized the strengths of each participating species. Vexar watched from the observation platform as Sergeant Jenkins, the promotion still felt strange to acknowledge, directed a mixed squad through preparations. A Mravani crystal being calculated trajectory angles while a human ensign calibrated equipment. 2 Krathar warriors, their traditional honor marks partially covered by Earth-manufactured uniform components, secured perimeter positions with uncharacteristic emphasis on concealment rather than intimidation. "Quite the experiment we've created," Captain Mitchell remarked, joining Vexar at the railing. The Joint Chiefs are still debating whether to classify this as a military program or a diplomatic initiative. "Perhaps the distinction is unnecessary," Vexar suggested. The Dominion High Command faced similar classification challenges. Below, Jenkins demonstrated a modified combat maneuver to accommodate the different physiologies in his squad. The Krathar trainees, both from prestigious warrior lineages, listened with unexpected receptiveness, behavior that would have been unthinkable before the exchange program. "Your warriors adapt quickly," Mitchell observed. "Survival necessity," Vexar replied. After the council deliberations, most species recognize that isolation from human methodology would create dangerous strategic disparities. Mitchell's expression revealed subtle amusement. "So they're learning our ways out of fear." Initially, perhaps, but something unexpected occurred during implementation. Vexar gestured toward one of the Krathar trainees, who was now assisting a Drillox with equipment adjustments, collaborative behavior previously alien to their cultural programming. They discovered efficiency. Dominion warrior culture prized individual excellence above all. Competition between warriors was considered essential for advancement. Vexar watched as the integrated squad moved with synchronized precision despite their physiological differences. "We never calculated the resource waste inherent in that approach." A communication alert chimed on Mitchell's datapad. She scanned the message, her expression shifting to one Vexar had learned to recognize as controlled surprise. "The UN Security Council just approved Phase 2, she reported. "Joint fleet exercises beginning next quarter." The implications were significant. Phase 2 would involve integrated command structures on actual combat vessels, Krathar battlecruisers operating with human tactical advisors, Earth naval vessels with alien technology specialists. The Dominion Strategic Command approved their participation yesterday, Vexar confirmed. Remarkable consensus, given the traditional view of ships as sovereign territory. Their conversation paused as Admiral Cathax approached, accompanied by Earth's Joint Chiefs Chairman. The two leaders, physically disparate but similarly authoritative in bearing, had developed an unexpected rapport during the program's implementation. Ambassador Vexar, Cathax acknowledged, using the diplomatic title still unfamiliar to the former commander. "The human leadership proposes accelerating our integration timeline." "The Proxima Centauri security situation?" Vexar inquired. The chairman nodded. "Our intelligence suggests the hegemony expansion won't wait for diplomatic solutions. We're proposing a joint demonstration force." This development would have been unthinkable months earlier, entrusting actual military operations to the experimental integrated structure. Yet, as Vexar observed Jenkins' squad executing their final exercise with flawless coordination, the proposal seemed not merely reasonable but inevitable. "There's an old human military adage," Mitchell said quietly. "The way you train is the way you fight." Vexar watched as a human trainee correctly anticipated and compensated for a Krathar's movement pattern without verbal communication. Evidence of the neural synchronization they documented in the council presentation. Perhaps what makes humans unique isn't their training methods, Vexar theorized. It's their capacity to recognize strength in differences rather than despite them. Below, the integrated squad completed their objective with a coordination that transcended their biological disparities. They weren't becoming homogeneous. Each species maintained its distinctive attributes, but they were becoming something greater than the sum of their parts. Kefex's mandibles clicked in the Krothar expression of profound realization. We feared human training would erase our identities. Instead, it has revealed possibilities we never considered.